So, welcome to the consumer law breakout session, panel, activity, post-lunch, nap time thing. Thank you for coming, or otherwise known as the best session you will attend today at FutureLaw. Don't let the word get out, they'll all come running. My name is Dan Lear. I work for a company called Avvo. We are a directory of lawyers come marketplace for legal consumers. I also practiced law for 6 years before I started doing this back in July. And generally sort of a legal tech evangelist. So just a couple quick words about the panel, and then we're just going to get started. So as we sort of discussed how we wanted to do this and what we thought would be the most helpful, I think we recognized, perhaps a bit egotistically, as you'll hear in a moment, we recognize that the quality of folks that are on the stage today is pretty high. And again, that's saying a lot about ourselves too, which we acknowledge is a bit self-serving, but nonetheless, here we go. And really, I think we also looked around at each other and said, like, wow, there are some fantastic people here. We would just prefer, and we hope that you would agree, that we could just have a conversation. We could ask each other questions, we could talk, you could talk, and we could really, we thought that would be the most valuable use of the time, and also a way that would really kind of draw out some interesting dialogues and questions and issues. So that's how we're going to proceed. So just a quick word about format. We'll just walk down the line and go ahead and introduce yourselves very briefly. And then Eddie Hartman is going to kick us off with the first question to a fellow panel. And then a panel member, and then we'll just kind of go from there. So, Sheri, you want to take it away?
Yeah, my name's Sheri Atwood. I'm the founder and CEO of SupportPay. So I am not a lawyer, nor am I a lawyer by trade, but I am a child of a divorce and a mother to a single parent, and our system enables parents to manage child support and share expenses directly with each other.
I'm Abe Geiger. I'm the founder and CEO of Shake. Also not a lawyer. We're front-loading the non-lawyers on the panel, I think.
That's why we like both of you so much.
Shake is a platform for creating simple contracts, and it's mobile first, but cross-platform at this point. So you can create, sign, and send managed documents from any device. And we think a lot about sort of bottom-up approach to the space. So interesting to hear about the top-down approaches that have sort of been the talk for most of the rest of the day. I think about it totally the opposite way, and sort of think about the opportunities to leapfrog some of the existing infrastructure that slows things down by going direct to consumer first. So excited to be here to talk about that.
Hi, my name is Richard Granat, and I'm the founder of a company called Smart Legal Forms, which is a document automation platform where we've automated more than 1,000 state-specific documents that we deliver either directly to consumers or through institutional channels like insurance companies and some banks and things like that. And my interest is really this latent market for legal services, the 80% of people who really can't afford legal fees, and trying to figure out a way to penetrate that market. And part of our company, we have another subsidiary called DirectLaw.com, and what DirectLaw does, it provides a virtual law firm platform to solos and small firms so they can deliver legal services online through a secure client portal that comes with our embedded document automation solution. We actually position that product for solo lawyers as an alternative for what let's say what LegalZoom used to be, because now you use lawyers. But we tell the lawyers that they can offer legal documents bundled with legal advice for a fixed price as limited legal services, and that's beginning to get some traction, and we're interested in continuing to pursue that.
And I'm going to just quickly take my moderator's privilege, I guess, and chime in. So Richard is the guy that you've heard a number of people name drop throughout the day. He's, am I going to embarrass you, Richard? He's been doing this stuff forever, and he's done a ton of interesting stuff in this space, and it's a pleasure to have him with us.
Thanks. Thank you.
Someone from Lex Machina was at a Codex event and got up and said, well, we're the sort of the godfather of the industry, having been started in 2008. And I wish that Dimitri and Richard had been there with me so that we could say, well, as your great-grandfather, Sonny. LegalZoom started in the year 2000, and we have about 70% name recognition if you ask people, hey, can you name a legal company online. 70% will say LegalZoom. 5% will say the law firm of Cage and Fish. By the way, can anyone tell me who the law firm of Cage and Fish is?
I know this, but that's because I've heard your speech.
No. It's the law firm from Ally McBeal. So a lot of people know our name. We're very pleased about that. We think we have a long way to go, long way to go. I'm privileged to be, I guess the last man standing in that one of my co-founders left to start an amazing beverage company. If you're not already drinking Zenify, drink Zenify. I'm an investor. Another one of my co-founders left me first for Kim Kardashian and now for Jessica Alba, and he's doing great. I'm very happy for him. I'm a zealot, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I think that law is, a system of law is what we should all reach for. My first son is named after Clarence Darrow. I love lawyers and the profession of law. I think that it's not currently serving America, or really the world, the way that the monopoly we granted it was intended to. And I want to see it changed. And I love, and I'm so humbled by seeing this groundswell, like a movement. You know, when we started this sort of thing, we get maybe 10 people, and some of them were looking for the D&D club. You know, and now it's like 400 people, you know, coming to this. It's amazing, and I'm humbled and proud to be here.
My name is Pieter Gunst. I started a company here out of Stanford Law School in 2011 called LawGives. My co-founder, Tony, sitting right there. Tony, if you leave me for Jessica Alba, I'll understand. So we are lawyers. That's where we started. I was a technology lawyer at DLA Piper. And one of the interesting things about practicing law in Belgium is because they also have a huge access to justice problem. They just let all the young graduates take care of that. So you see crazy things, and like contrary to seeing all those clients at DLA Piper, like the big companies, that's the stuff that's really touching you, right? So this is where I developed a passion for access to justice, and then you come here, you're in this ecosystem of innovation, and we were just so fortunate to find all the support in building something that we thought would go towards more meaningful access to justice. So we started LawGives. It's an online marketplace for legal services. The initial problem we were looking at was how do we take all these people who can't afford legal services and maybe match them to this surplus of lawyers that apparently exists, right? Students coming out of law school, not finding jobs. We heard a lot of that. And we learned a lot doing that. We evolved. We tried to figure out how to make ourselves sustainable, and I think we nailed that. We raised money. We learned how to be not risk averse, which is, as a lawyer, you're trained to do that. And it's been an amazing journey. And the past year, we've actually been building on top of what we're doing. And we're going to release something new in 10 days. It's called legal.io. Go check out the website. And maybe I'll talk about that a bit more.
Yeah, and a little shameless plug for Pieter and LawGives. If you rush to the site, you might be able to still get in on their private beta, which has yet to launch. I did. I'm in.
I did too.
Cool.
You guys, I appreciate the support.
So Eddie, you were going to kick us off with the first question,
absolutely.
so I'm turning it over to you, my friend.
So this goes to the, I was going to ask Abe Geiger if he is indeed the most stylish man in law. But instead, if people don't know Shake, it is maybe the most beautiful app that you've ever seen, now part of Legal Shield. But I'm going to instead ask Richard, who, for people, if you don't know, truly the pillar of the industry, first, pioneer. We have mad respect for Richard. We saw a panel this morning, great panel with Daniel in the back there and other people talking about revolutions in big data for law. And I noticed that nearly everybody up there was a lawyer, if not from academia. Now you see this panel and we're all focused on consumers. And heck, two of us aren't lawyers. I became a lawyer without going to law school. And so as the person closest to lawyers and technology for the period that you've done it, is this change going to happen through lawyers or around lawyers? Will lawyers embrace technology and go VLO, or won't they? Is the question to you, Richard.
It's to me. That's a tough question, because we see, even in here's a good example. We have this virtual law firm platform, and we see a churn rate among lawyers. They sign up, and they all think they're going to get rich, as if they have their own LegalZoom, because their expectations are distorted, and then they have to learn something. And if they learn something, they're eating into the time that they can bill out. So what we've begun to focus on, it came up this morning, a younger and younger generation. One of the things I do at Florida Coastal, which is a school you may probably never heard of, but Stephanie Kimbrough, who wrote the book on virtual lawyering, and myself run a new institute on training JD students in law practice technology, virtual lawyering, legal project management, legal expert systems, legal documentation, and the students love all this. And what I see is happening is that the change will come as the generations age out. That it came up very clearly. Who was talking this morning about his brother and all that? Yeah, the guy,
Daniel, right back
Daniel,
there.
yeah. So that experience really matches what we see. We have a bell-shaped curve with a small number of lawyers who stick with our platform for 4 or 5 years and they learn it, and then other people can't get either beyond their economic model. The economic model still for most law firms is what I call the job shop model. If you're familiar with that, the job shop model is every problem is unique. Therefore, we have to build by the hour, and our experience is based on our expertise. The alternative is what consumers want is the value chain business model, which is technology, lawyers, paralegals, systems, and procedures with a legal service delivered at a fixed price at prices that people can afford. Well, lawyers who bill by the hour see the value chain business model as a real threat, so they can't move from one business model to the other easily. Some do, but it's still a very small minority. So my sense is it's an age problem, and it'll probably take 10 years. I'm not talking about the other regulatory issues and the other kind of changes. It's going to take, the mainstream will have to simply age out. So I go to a trade show, and the lawyer comes up to me, and he says, I still have my secretary read my emails to me. And I say to him, I think you should retire, I mean, what is that about?
Right, and you're somehow proud of that, right? They're somehow proud of that.
Yeah, he's still proud of that, right?
So I want to quickly ask Abe and Sheri, because I had conversations with each of these folks before the panel, long before. I'm not that bad of a preparer. And they both had really interesting stories about why they, with at least limited background in legal, sort of waded into this space, particularly with sort of a lot of hand-waving about sort of the litigious nature of lawyers. And so I'd love to have you folks sort of talk about how you came into this space and how you did so with an eye to kind of this big sort of elephant in the room or obstacle that sits in the middle, which is the very relatively entrenched legal industry and its way of doing things and its very reactive nature to outside threats. I'd love to hear both of you talk about that.
Go ahead.
I was going to have you. So how I got into this was as I mentioned, child of a divorce, and it felt like my parents fought constantly. And what everybody talks about, especially in popular media, is divorce, 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 and how horrible it is. But what they don't realize is they say the top 2 reasons for divorce are money and communication. Yet when you get divorced with children, you have to communicate about money. So it doesn't get better, it gets worse, way worse. And everybody talks about divorce, but that's not the problem. A divorce, it's dealing with this person for the rest of your life afterwards. And so I did my own divorce. We had multiple houses, cars, boats, lived in the valley, have a kid, and I did it for $350. But so as amicable divorces could be, I had one. And what I quickly realized is there's all these services after the legal professionals leave that people need help with, that there was nobody actually doing innovation. But even through that, I got a ton of be careful that you're not, I forget the word, practicing law but not supposed to be.
Yeah,
that
unauthorized
stuff.
practice of law. Right.
That, yeah.
But just cast that word out of your mind.
Yes, but I was told that. I was told, oh, you're competing with lawyers, you better be careful, like all of this stuff. And we are specifically positioned that we come in after the order or agreement happens, but definitely it was something, especially in the beginning, that people tried really hard for me not to do or to continue forward with SupportPay.
Well, and if I can editorialize quickly, when we talked, I think one of the things that I found really inspiring was I kind of pushed you on this, and you said for the the need, as you saw it, just outweighed the risk. And I think, I don't know, I was very inspired by that.
Yeah, so what people don't realize is globally, there's 455 million parents that live apart. Of those 455 million, 300 million of them exchange over $900 billion every year in child support and child expenses. If you look at the US, it's 55 million parents. What everybody talks about is the 16 million parents who are managed by the state government. Those are people who are either currently or in the past receiving public assistance, or they're not receiving, the quote-unquote deadbeat dads. There's this other 39 million parents in the US alone exchanging over $200 billion that they're sort of left on their own to try to figure this out. And it's right there in the space of a legal consequence for not following up on a legally binding order. I saw the need, and the fact that no one was doing any innovation in this space is much greater than, saying, fine, forget it, I gave up. And I also waited 5 years hoping somebody would come up with the solution so that I didn't have to.
And I actually remember as we were talking, I can't remember, I think this was on just the call with Eddie. Eddie was like, the question I want to ask Sheri is, why doesn't she have any competition?
Mm-hmm.
That's a $900 billion market. That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, she really is the only person out there.
I do know of one other actually in Seattle.
Yeah, so similar, they're doing something very similar now. And there's no competition, which and it's like the thing I keep telling people is like, it's a problem that is so obvious it's stupid, right? So it's not like I'm some genius that I came up with this. It's like, it's almost so in front of you that why isn't there more people doing it? But I think it gets back to the question, which is this fear of somewhat going a little bit close into the legal space and then getting sued or litigious. I'll hand it over to Abe.
So I came at this a couple different ways. One, I was interested in big sort of markets with high margin service businesses, right? So law is probably the biggest and best example of that. So that was one thing. I was looking at solutions, technology solutions for those types of problems. My wife's a lawyer at a big firm, and so I saw some of the inefficiencies that she goes through on a daily basis. And the first thing that we actually started working on was a more traditional enterprise solution for big firms. I had sold enterprise software before, and I really didn't want to go that route. So that was kind of why I axed the top-down enterprise software solution from my list. I was also working in venture at a fund in New York, and so I was looking at trends. And the ones I was really excited about were this sort of collaborative consumption, P2P economy growth, and I was thinking a lot about how do you build trust with those types of small transactions between individuals and small businesses that don't have repeat iteration and don't have the kind of deal size to support traditional legal infrastructure and fees. And so I was thinking a lot about that. And so all of those things kind of came together. Plus, we took a mobile-first approach. One, because we really thought, in 5 years or 2 years, or I don't know exactly how long it'll be, the notion that you can't view a document, make changes to it, get it signed, start it on your phone, finish it on your computer, vice versa, I think will be very foreign to everyone, and we'll think, oh my God, I can't believe we did it this way before. We had to be at our computers to change these documents. And so we wanted to start there. It also forced us to be really disciplined and whatever, but big trend, right? Mobile was the future, and so we wanted to start with that problem and approach it from that direction, and thought that was a big opportunity. So that's kind of all of the angles that I came at this from. And the last one, I think, I was working at startups, and I'd been operating, I'd hired consultants, I'd consulted for startups, and my problem in those situations was I wanted to do something that was standard, boilerplate. I wanted to understand what I was committing to. I wanted to understand what they were committing to. And I got really frustrated with a non-lawyer, not feeling like I really understood these contracts that I was signing. So I didn't feel like I had a meeting of the minds, right, which is the whole point. So I was getting distracted by all the minutia. But I didn't want to pay anybody because it was a $2,000 job or a $5,000 job or whatever, and it wasn't worth it to me to pay $500. So I think a lot of people get into that category, and that's really what we wanted to solve. And there's so much data in our contracts, and I wanted to expose that. So I use Kelley Blue Book as an example for you're buying or selling a car, you get some reference point for what the market says is a fair price for that car. And that doesn't exist for goods and services. It's all very subjective. Lawyers can help with that because they see a lot of deals, but for these small transactions that we wanted to help provide infrastructure for, there really isn't anything for that. So you talk to your friends, you're not sure, and you don't. A lot of times you don't want to screw the other person over. They're not trying to screw you over, but you're worried that you're falling into one of those two categories, and so sometimes people just don't do the deals. So we wanted to unlock this data, make it more accessible and transparent, so people felt good about these deals that they were doing, didn't feel like they were going to end up getting into trouble or getting taken advantage of. So that's probably a much longer answer than it needed to be. But.
Well, and I'm going to tease you out just
I'll
one
give you
more
a short.
piece. Oh, no, go ahead, Richard.
So I'll be a little bit shorter. So I've had a singular focus, which is access to the legal system, and the 80% of folks who can't really afford legal fees. Basically, America's broke. Most people don't have more than $1,500 in a savings account. So we have a lot of lawyers basically chasing after, in terms of consumer legal needs, just those people who can pay legal fees, whether it's Legal Match or even Avvo. Basically, those lawyers are looking for people who can pay what I consider to be hourly rates and so forth. So my commitment really started when I helped start the U.S. Legal Services Program, and then I had the first paralegal school in the United States. And then in the fullness of time, I created this thing called the People's Law Library of Maryland, which was the first legal information website, of which now we have 50 under the auspices of Mark O'Brien and Pro Bono Net. And this was about 1998, and I began to see then the power of the internet in terms of software development. Because if you developed a Windows application, it was really hard to get any kind of traction with consumers. But the impact of the internet means that you could develop a niche kind of product, like she's developing here. There's a long-tail strategy. There are hundreds of these niches where you can develop a narrow kind of a focused program and build either a company or a real lifestyle around it. So we've built... So we're focused on software. That's why I made the comment this morning that it's important that the bar not impose a limitation on innovation, because I think software scales. We don't have enough pro bono attorneys or other attorneys or even limited legal paralegals in the country to really deal with the need. The only thing that's really a truly scalable solution, in my view, is software. So again, I can point to, if you don't know, Pro Bono Net runs in about 40 states, legal document server, which last year had, 700,000 document assemblies. It's actually a little bit off people's radar screens. So we're at the very beginning of this, because we know, because of Moore's law, that software development is exponential, not linear. Most lawyers are still thinking in linear terms, but we're going to see a real push in the power of software in the next 2 or 3 years. The lawyers who deny this, saying law is really special, do have their heads in the sand. And in some ways, it's the beginning of the beginning, but it's an exciting time to be in this space. And I think there's lots of opportunity here. If people join in, get involved, create your own little companies. If you don't, you don't have to have a $100 million company. You can have a $5 million company and live well and just serve a narrow niche of folks and have a good lifestyle, like I do.
Or I was going to jump down to Pieter, just because I know they're really thoughtful about, not to skip you, Eddie, but I didn't intend for it to be a walking panel. I know you guys are just really thoughtful about sort of the legal services delivery model. So I was just going to have you riff on that for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, we took the approach when we started out, and we knew very little about this. Well, let's try to figure out what is the best way. What is the best way through software to provide access, right? It's just user experience. Like this is the huge issue we're faced with, because so many people don't even find the way. It's confusing. It's a maze. Like that's clear. So if that is your starting point, then you say, okay, any regulation should support this shared mission that we have of providing access. Okay. Now, some of the regulation doesn't necessarily achieve that, right? So if you build a product, now suddenly you're dealing with all these kinds of constraints. And to give you some interesting examples, right? You build a company, you want to make it good, so you need to hire good people. So which means we need to figure out how we're going to monetize. Well, I mean, look at some of the big marketplaces that have emerged in the last years. Uber, Airbnb, how do they monetize? Well, they fee split, right? They take a percentage of what someone is paying. Can't do that. Well, we have consumers coming to us, this is another example, and they're looking for a lawyer. Well, maybe the best user experience, and I don't know if this is true, is me saying, here's the best lawyer. But you can't do that because you'd be a referral service, right? You don't want to be recommending. So there's all these things that affect how you build a product, and the end result is not necessarily the best solution. We don't know, but we are not in a position where we can freely experiment. So I guess the question then becomes is how can we help the profession innovate faster, right? And what we've done a lot is iterating, measuring, and basically creating all these different communities of lawyers and just looking at behavior, what works, what doesn't, and then improving from there. And it is within constraints, and we've always taken the position we're not going to do like Uber does and just go into a market and say, well, we don't really care, sue us, because it's not going to help your position with the bar. Also, your audience is very primed to sue you, so you gotta be careful. Yeah, so we tried to build the best solution within the regulatory framework, but certainly the constraints that are there may affect getting to the best outcome.
And I love how, and I don't know that this is necessarily, I don't know that I've seen this said, so that means that the idea you're about to hear is really new and you should all listen. No, I'm just kidding. But I do think this notion of like user-centered design totally shines a light on how so much of what the legal services marketplace has just totally lost its way, right? I mean, I come from Seattle, where sort of Amazon is basically just taking over our city. It's another story entirely. But I do love Jeff Bezos' statement that you start at the consumer and you work your way back, right?
Yeah.
And lawyers, we start with ourselves and then just kind of stay there.
Well, I mean, and there was
and like this notion of like, oh, let's figure out how to actually like serve the consumer in the way that they want to be served is like totally radical. And like these new sort of delivery mechanisms are just completely laying bare the failure of that sort of mindset. So go ahead, Pieter.
Yeah, no, I think you made a call, Richard, like get into the space and innovate. I mean, I think this is the easiest mistake to make with any startup. Like we started as lawyers with a bunch of assumptions about how things should work. Many of those assumptions turned out to be false, right? So, I mean, clear your mind, try to take the perspective of a consumer, go talk to your users, go to a legal aid organization if you're gonna face that, like try to get a divorce, maybe, as an experiment. But yeah, that took us a while to get. And then in retrospect, how can you not think about that? It makes total sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of what makes it, in a way, easier for us non-lawyers because we're somewhat ignorant and we haven't been trained in all the ways that lawyers have to be aware of some of those things. So we can kind of blindly go in and say, oh, I get this. This is my problem as a consumer, as the user. And the consumer can be a consumer as we're talking about them, with a typical consumer law type of situation, or they can be the consumer of the legal service, and that could be a client. And so I think the consumers, either one of those, are the ones that are going to really drive change. And they're expecting more transparency, more efficiency, better products. And so, that's another reason why design has really, really been forefront for us and really important, because people's expectations of the tools and the services that they use are so much higher now. And some of the trappings of enterprise software are building a lot of wingdings for everybody to get consensus through a long sales process. And, a lot of that stuff doesn't get used or complicates the things that do get used. And so those are some of the things that are slow and hard to get over. And with consumers, and you go direct, you don't have to deal with some of that stuff.
And just to give Shake a quick shout out, like you guys should all just download it and try it. Like it's fun to use. Like it's fun to draft contracts. It's so easy and it is so well built that just to like you're walking your talk, my friend.
Well, thank you. And it's free, by the way. So
yeah, exactly. Sheri, I saw you nodding your head. Did you want to chime in?
I was just going to say, back to getting in the consumer's feet or trying to walk what they're doing. I'll give you a perfect example. In California, so the biggest reason why children are impacted by divorce is usually the lack of relationship with both parents. The reason for that is that or a lot of people say, fine, you don't pay child support, you don't see the kid. Yet they show that 97% of parents involved pay. But in order to get a child support modification in California, you have to fill out 32 pages of documentation. And even if you go to a lawyer, they're gonna hand you back that paper and say, either you fill this out or you pay somebody $250 to fill it out, right? So that's not necessarily our space. The data we have is gonna make it much easier for them to fill that out, but that's just one example. Go through anything, small claims court. I went to small claims court. Here's an idea, somebody can do this. I went to small claims court. The person paying me couldn't pay me the whole amount, so they said, set up payments. Well, how do I collect payments from somebody in small claims court? They just said, do it, and then I have to figure out how to do it, right? So there's so many things after the fact of right on that cusp of a legal agreement or order that I think there's just a huge opportunity for innovation.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you this question because I have a theory, but you would know better. How many disputes that arise from the stuff that you're dealing with are willful and intentional versus just, accidental because it was too difficult and inconvenient to do it?
Yeah, a great question. So what we found was parents are 90% more likely to exchange child support using our system than not. And the reason, 90% more likely, and the reason why is the transparency. What we do is you enter an expense and you attach a receipt. It shows that the expense is for the kid. The parent sees that and makes a payment. Prior to that, it was an assumption, well, it can't be that expensive, or I don't want to deal with this, or I can't afford this, or I'm not going to make any payment because I don't want to, or she made me really mad, or he made me really mad. So now we found by taking it all and everything coming from SupportPay rather than the X, the emotional part gets taken out of the conflict. And like I said, 90% more likely to exchange because of that.
That's cool. We do something similar with paying our nanny on the books and taxes and everything, and I think a lot of people do that off the books because it's just so confusing and complicated, and they're like, I'm going to get this wrong, and they don't mean to. It's just kind of so hard, and so you make it easier, then you get rid of a lot of the disputes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I saw Ed, hold on, Eddie was going to pipe up, and then Richard, I'll let you two fight it out.
I was going to ask Eddie a question also.
Okay, sure, yeah.
And then you can do it. What do you hope to accomplish with your ABS in the UK?
Aha.
That's a good question, right?
What ABS in the UK? Nobody's really supposed to know that. By the way,
No, we know that.
I know most of you have to go to the bathroom, so I'll be quick.
Okay. I think they'd be interested in that.
So some quick math,
And-
right? AB.
Yeah, and Eddie, maybe just for folks listening at home, describe quickly what an ABS is. I mean, I'm sure most people know, but real quick.
2003 Clementi report is issued to Parliament in the UK. That's apparently a building or something. They say law is broken in the UK. Most people can't get the legal help they need. 2007 Legal Services Act is passed. 2009 New South Wales, being a place in Australia largely populated by people that the British said weren't fit to live in England, said, you know what, if it's good for England, we're going to do it here. The law firm of Slater and Gordon is started, not run by lawyers, by the way, run by business people and technologists. It is today, by most estimates, although they're not releasing those figures that I've seen anyway, the 6th largest law firm in the world. 2011, the UK says, well, I guess it's time to wake up. We said in 2007 we were going to start allowing law firms to accept public investment and be run like a business. And sure enough, in 2011, they get a few out, 2012, a few more, 2013, a few more, 2014, a few more, and finally in 2015, our application gets through. In January of this year, we became the first U.S. corporation to own a law firm in the UK. That is our ABS. We're very proud to have it. What do we want to do with it? When we think about the things that are wrong with law today, when we hear the ABS, for example, saying only 15% of people with a serious legal problem seek the help of a lawyer, that's down from 30% in '92, by the way. That implies that 85% of people with a legal need don't seek the help of a lawyer. First, let me ask you, if 15% of Americans get the help of a lawyer, and that's a $100 billion market by every estimate I've ever seen, what about that other 85%? Can we call that $500 billion? And that's transactional. But what we're hearing from Sheri and Abe and others is the needs aren't transactional, they're relationship-based. We don't call them customers, we call them clients. We put people on retainer. The language of law indicates an ongoing relationship. So what do we want to do with our ABS? We want to be more flexible in how we work with lawyers to create a relationship-based model. I think that in every walk of law, a person doesn't need a will, they need an estate planner. A person doesn't need to incorporate, they need a general counsel. A person doesn't just get divorced, they need SupportPay. You know, these problems are ongoing. Law is not a point in time, it's a thread. So that's what we want to do.
So this gives you the flexibility to innovate inside a law firm.
Right.
Whereas in the U.S., since law firms don't have capital, all the innovation is happening in software companies outside of law firms, which they then have to market to a range of law firms to sustain themselves. So that makes it more difficult for a law firm to have a differentiated advantage unless somehow they have capital internally. It seems to me that what you can do is develop innovative service packages and experiment with them, and then make that, as Baxter talked about this morning, increase your net asset value because you're creating value inside the law firm as a delivery mechanism.
Ralph Baxter may be the most innovative man in big law, and I guess
Yeah, I
he's
agree with that. I agree with
stepping
that.
away.
Yeah.
But, you know, guys, it's absolutely possible, and bless you all, Daniel in the back there, working on tools to make law firms more innovative, awesome, but no one on this panel has a law firm, I guess, except our ABS.
I have one.
Well, okay, I guess what we're all here focusing on, though,
right.
are our C corporations, right?
Correct, yes.
We are trying to find ways to change law by going outside of law firms. And I think that there is more than a $500 billion opportunity. I think $500 billion is to start. I think we focus on the additional things. Would SupportPay have come under the traditional measure of a TAM, a total addressable market, as measured by legal services? I don't think so. But Sheri's built a great business, and there are other businesses out there. If you are a law student thinking, what am I going to do after I graduate? Or if you're a recent law grad and thinking, there aren't a lot of jobs out there. There are a lot of jobs out there.
Yeah.
You just got to define them.
Well, let's say I had a brilliant idea. I'm just getting out of law school, and I had $100,000 in student debt. Why can't I crowdsource finance my law firm today? I can maybe amortize my student debt. I could spend my time developing an innovative software application. Why can't that happen? We know why it can't happen, right?
Cannot happen in the U.S.
Right. But it can happen in the UK. So that opens up really opportunities that who knows where they're going to go,
It
right?
can happen in the UK. It can happen in Australia. Soon it may be available in Canada. And guys, I got to ask you, does anyone really believe technology is going to observe geographic boundaries much longer?
Much longer.
85% of the country isn't getting served. How much longer is that going to stand?
That's right.
We can either have a measured change or the roof can cave in. It's one way or the other.
That's right.
And I was just going to say, too, there's, to Eddie's $500 billion number, and I don't want to get sort of, but those, I mean, 15%, right, of 100% of people who know they have a legal issue. There's tons of statistics out there that demonstrate that a lot of consumers don't even know that they have a legal issue. So there's so much opportunity through education, through, inbound marketing to draw people in and help them understand, and then on a transactional basis that they're comfortable with, providing them with the services that they want and need.
Dan, there's also a lot of evidence that the 15% that does consume would consume more.
Right, if it were easy.
They simply cannot pay. By the way, median in the U.S. is $285, in a place like L.A. County, $325. Right. Silicon Valley is $10,000 an hour, something like that. So the fact is that 15% would undoubtedly consume more if you just believe in equilibrium, right? Elasticity curves. If the price was a little more affordable. And why does the price have to be so high? Ironically, because most lawyers at small firms, and I'm talking 5 people and under, can't fill their calendar. They're working 10 to 20% of the time, but they're paying rent on 100% of their hours. If simply they had broader adoption, if we could fight non-consumption with a more rational model, I think a lot of things would simply hit a natural equilibrium, and a lot of people would get helped. And a lot of people who wanted to do law would be able to do law.
So, and just to riff on that from an Avvo perspective, so we recently rolled out a product called Avvo Advisor that's a 15-minute bite of legal advice for $40, made, we hope, pretty easy, usually through an app on your smartphone. And we've had some good consumer demand. We're hopeful and optimistic for the business. The lawyer demand has been crazy. And these are people fighting for $40 for 15 minutes, right? Just to Eddie's point about not filling their calendar. They're looking for any opportunity they can. So anyway, so we are like at about 20 minutes left. So I wanted to see if there were any, we've sort of been riffing here. If there are questions from the audience, if not, we can continue. Yes, back there.
So based on this panel and the opening talk, it sounds like we need a TurboTax for contracts, for contract law, where I can go in, I can select the kind of situation I'm in, and then it'll compute me through my options and add options. Do you think there is something close to that available today? If so, what is it?
It's called ShakeLaw.com.
Right.
They've
Okay.
just been acquired.
And
so.
direct law too. I mean, I think
Yeah.
there are solutions out there for that. There's some structural problems that make it hard to reach a broad audience, right? It's very expensive to acquire users that are paying you a very small amount. So, for companies like us, you need to raise a lot of money and spend a lot of money to get the word out, right? You didn't know who we were, and you're here, and that's terrible. I feel bad about that, right? So it's proof in the pudding. And Richard's been doing this for a long time, and their solution is much more sophisticated and handles a lot more intricate, decision trees than what ours does. So they do exist.
Yeah.
But I will say my message is a little different. I don't think you just need TurboTax for contract. I think you then need a relationship with a lawyer who can help you after the fact. You've got a contract for a reason. Those needs are going to be ongoing. And I think what I'd love to, and that's one of the reasons I'm excited about your partnership. I think it's great, because people need ongoing help with somebody who understands their situation and can be there for them.
Yeah, and I think Eddie's totally right, and we agree. And I always say this, most people come at me and say, oh, you're trying to cut lawyers out, and that's totally not ever been our vision. We want to help people with the stuff that they're not paying lawyers for, but when they have a question and they need to get over the hump of, am I doing this right? Am I answering this question correctly? That's when you need to interject the, actual guidance and actual services. And if you can do that at the right point, and you can triage a lot of the intake that happens on that initial consult with a lawyer, and you can surface all that information, then that getting over the hump thing can be really fast and really efficient. So people can pay $40 for 15 minutes, get a lot out of that 15 minutes, and move on. And so I think that's, to Eddie's point again about matching the supply and demand. There's so much supply, so much demand. The infrastructure doesn't fit. If you can make these services that much more efficient, then people will be able to service a lot more of that market without taking pay cuts, right? The lawyers will still make the same amount of money, but they'll service a lot more needs, and the consumers will pay a lot less.
I wonder how you see the value of such services evolve in the next decade, because we're entering a world where every big law firm is putting their forms online, right? It seems to me that the value of that is going to go to zero, and all the value is going to be in the service provision. Do you agree, or you think not?
I totally agree. That's why we never charged for our forms, because we thought we wanted them to be really good, but we thought there were so many options for people that were really that cost sensitive and wanted a free one. They'd find it somewhere. Right. And so we didn't want to compete on that. We wanted to compete on other things.
So I'm going to
Just last comment.
follow up. Okay.
Follow up, yeah. So the scalability seems like a problem, because in personal contracts, there are just so many variables compared to the government tax forms, which are set, and you can, it's easier to deal with those, right?
So our approach has always been, don't let perfect be the enemy of done or good.
Which is exactly the opposite way of most legal providers approach it, right? It's
If you take a top-down approach, to sell something to a firm, they typically want it to solve all the problems or a lot of the problems and work 100% of the time. And when you do it the way that we've done it, we've said, you know what, we're just not going to solve that problem. We're not going to track changes and allow negotiations back and forth, because these deals are so simple and so easy. We're just not going to do that. And if you need that, then you don't use us. You use something else. And so that's actually kind of a nice thing about going direct to consumer and not going top down, is you can get away with that. So yeah.
So I'm going to pop over here.
My name is Sanjay Adkirkar, founder of Advisor. We focus on client-focused immigration solutions. I just want to ask the question what Richard just asked is, all the software companies in legal tech coming up with all these innovative ideas, right? Like SupportPay, Shake. What is the big problem? Is the consumer adoption is a big problem, or the law firms adopting these solutions? Which do you think, from your experience, is a bigger problem in terms of market cap adoption?
So I think for me, it's both. The problem that when it comes to child support is all the conflict and issues happen after the legal professions step out. So if you go to any family law lawyer, 90% of the time, they're going to say all conflict has to do with divorce and the current assets. And then it's like, oh yeah, let's just share expenses. That's going to be so easy and great afterwards, because they're not privy to the conflict after. So, and then at the same time, it's consumers saying, wait, I need a better way to do this, I'm tired of being a bill collector, right? I divorced him, so I didn't have to talk to him, and now I gotta talk to him more. Wait, that was me, sorry. But, you know, I have to go back and forth. So I think it's a combination of both.
I think it's also a problem of building trust, right? So you have a new company, a new brand, you're going direct. Legal law for people that aren't lawyers is very intimidating. It's, you know, you're scared about it, right? The example somebody used earlier about when you click the button to buy the ticket, you know, there's a little bit of angst, like, am I doing this wrong? But the stakes are low. When the stakes are really high, it's much more anxiety-ridden, right? So building trust, getting people to the point where they understand what they've done and they understand what they're about to do and they feel okay about it, like, that's hard and it takes some time. You can't just come out tomorrow and be there, which is, you know, LegalZoom has done a lot to build that brand.
We've done studies, and we found price is a factor, but there are many other factors. That anxiety before you click. What's the process going to be? What's the quality of my lawyer? And, of course, the bars won't let you really advertise about your quality or your specialty. The process is opaque. You may know an hourly rate, but not the number of hours. There's active friction stopping you from establishing a brand, state-by-state regulation, among others. All these things mean that the consumer doesn't know what they're going to get. And they've heard horror stories of a person signing their name to something, you know, so they'll deal with the devil and you didn't read it carefully. So they're terrified. There's no mark of quality. Imagine that it was you buying a car and you had to go to some guy down the street and you had no idea if it was going to break down on you or what. It's an analogous situation in law.
I mean, this is super interesting. This point on trust is something that we emphasize so hard in our platform and thought a lot about. And one interesting thing, I think, if you are looking to build a legal technology company, is to take a step back and to understand that there's a lot of offline worldly work already being done, and that's where people go today to find trusted help. It is a law firm, it is a legal aid organization, and we can also think about it if we don't think, okay, we're going to build this one centralized solution, like what's a technology that can help them? Because they have built up so much expertise in conveying that trust to clients. Really, they are the network nodes where people go now. So what does that network look like in the future? How does that work?
Let me just, when a consumer arrives at a website, whether it's a law firm website or a legal information website, they need to see signs of trust and credibility. And law firm websites don't necessarily do a good job of that. In your material, I've been co-chair of what's known as the e-lawyering task force of the ABA, which is to help lawyers deliver legal services online. And we put in the materials best practices that we developed. One is best practices for legal document providers. Another one is best practices for legal information websites. And a third one, I think I gave it to you, is best practices for lawyers delivering legal services online. And there's 8 or 9 best practices in that. So, for example, if you're delivering legal information, obviously, on a law firm site or a legal information website, the last date that it was updated should be there. The source should be there. And most of these, one of these we got approved by the ABA's House of Delegates, but we find that they're not widely adopted for a lot of reasons. You can hit a legal information website that's selling legal forms, and you think it's a law firm website because they have a picture of a person in a law library. It's totally deceptive, is the only way to describe it. But you would look for things like BBC seals, privacy seals, all those things increase trust. So there is obviously a healthy business that can be developed, right?
I agree, but why isn't there the kind of trust that you'd get with, say, Mercedes-Benz? Ralph Baxter's right there.
Because of the branding, right?
Where's the brand? He built one of the biggest law firms. He built it to nearly $1 billion a year in turnover. In any other industry, they'd be a household name. And I just can point to so much friction that stops law firms from establishing that kind of nationwide credibility that would encourage consumption because people say, well, I can trust them. I've heard of them, you know?
The biggest nationwide brand today that consumers recognize is LegalZoom, except it's not a law firm. They had the money to put into it, you know, to build that brand.
I think that's why I'm very so great about LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer, what they have done to the legal tech industry and consumer space. It's really amazing. Thanks for the good work.
So we'll go over here. And don't forget to introduce yourself.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Leisha. I'm CEO of FactBox. We're a practice of law app, not consumer facing. But I'm very curious when I talk to friends who have consumer apps, it seems like there's an issue of like the dovetails with what you were just talking about, that they don't think about lawyers until they're past point of having the problem. And so like in medical, they'll go to the hospital. Like there's some place to go because they don't know anything. And I know that this has been an issue for apps, like trying to like, how do we have people find us versus just SEO? So I'm curious about your guys' perspective on that with all these big goals. Like how do you actually get people to you?
Well, on the internet, we know from our documented research is what we call an engagement issue. Engagement means that people don't know they have a legal problem, or they put it off, or they bounce out of the website. So there are engagement devices that one can begin to deploy, which move people down the trail. I mentioned before, little mini expert systems, which help people on the preventive law side. Stephanie Kimbrough, who's my colleague, who's been here for the past year, is doing important work on gamification in the context of consumer websites, games which teach people, and using gamification technology as an engagement device. And I think we'll see more of that, even though it's a challenge. You know, those kind of tools, I'm sure, face LegalZoom all the time, right, in terms of engaging people, moving them up the lead trail until they actually convert. So there is technologies that we can actually borrow from other industries that should be moved into the legal space. Because you're quite right. People don't even know they have a legal problem until they have a crisis, right?
I want to comment on that one too, because I think this is the hardest challenge for any consumer-facing legal tech company. How do I find clients, right? That's usually the driver of your business. Actually, we've taken an interesting approach and stance on that. So you had Airbnb, you had Uber, right? We actually don't believe that in the next decade or two, we're going to see one of those emerge in the legal industry. We think it's a much more decentralized play, and it goes into like, who do people trust today to find legal help? So I think maybe one answer to your question is not how do I spend millions of dollars in advertising to acquire clients in a non-scalable way, but it's how do I distribute and decentralize my solutions so much that I'm in the face of the consumer no matter where they go. And it becomes so interesting because with all the data that we're gathering today and everything that we can understand based on search inputs and behavior and things that people install on their mobile apps, I mean, you can draw some pretty crazy conclusions about something simple like when a company should like start thinking about registering a trademark, to give an example. But I think the future is highly decentralized, and we're not going to see that one winner in the market at all.
That's fascinating. That's some really key insight, Pieter. Thank you.
I mean, I think, yeah, let's look at Avvo, right? Like, Avvo is huge, but still in the scale of the total market. Like, same thing with LegalZoom. Like, why don't we have a big four in legal? It's because the nature of the goods, it's different.
You know, Pieter, in Germany, 85% of people have legal insurance.
Right.
Now, I work at a company, and I've worked at other companies, and every time there was a contract to be signed, it got reviewed by counsel. How many of you have signed something without going to counsel? I mean, you're aware that there's a body of contract law, right? In Germany, it's affordable and convenient, and there's a brand that they can trust their insurance provider, and they do it. And here we just I think non-consumption is a bigger problem than anybody realizes. I really do.
So I'm going to chime in. So we have 3 minutes and 3 people standing, maybe 4. So if you can ask your question quickly, we will try to answer it quickly so that we can hopefully get everybody in. Kian.
Hi, yes, I'm Kian from Legal, and we sniff out the fine print so you don't have to. We're that type of tool to try to get pre-consumption. Our question, it was twofold in the answer. The first one with respect to trust. And what we're finding is the market, whether it's consumer or small medium business, there's 2 barriers. There's assumption and there's trust. So as a piece of advice, as quickly as possible, how would you tackle the assumption problem? Because people, they've drawn their own conclusions, and that is a huge barrier to be able to get to that next step.
And quickly.
Produce really good content. You mean assumption like they're assuming things that aren't true about you?
Exactly. It's going to be too complicated, it's not accurate, you know, it merges in all of them, but it's just that barrier. Even Sheri probably would talk to that to say, what is that barrier for people, parents, to say, why should I replace what I'm doing? Because Sheri does have competitors, and those are people and processes. That's the competition. So how do you change that and take away from those assumptions?
Yeah, so trust for us is actually not trust from us. Our customers want trust and privacy to make sure the other person, they get to decide what the other parent sees and doesn't. So what I say is our biggest fear is not they get hacked from outside, but that the other parent gets to see their information. But for that, it's been testimonials, like I said, unique content, putting us out there as an expert in this space. There's not a lot of unique content when it comes to child support and child support issues. But it's also it's taken a lot of time. We're at 15,000 users it's taken us a year to get there. So it takes time.
Awesome. Let's go over here to Allie.
Hi, I'm Allie Gerkman with ILS, the Institute for the Advancement of the American Legal System. And I've been to a number of events like this, and I'm also on a number of court and bar commissions that kind of get to these issues of access for consumers. And what I notice is that these two groups are not represented in the other. So you all are not at those types of meetings, and the folks who are in those meetings are not here. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the solutions aren't going to come from some kind of collaboration, but I think often sort of a big tent where you're bringing in all of the knowledge and the tech side and decades and beyond decades potentially of experience and knowledge from the legal side could result in something, some solutions down the road that are actually better for clients today and tomorrow. Are there any ways that you see collaboration being more possible, or are there already collaborations that I simply am unaware of?
Invite us.
I mean, we at Avvo, just speaking a little more selfishly, like we know people who have built entire bankruptcy practices off of our platform at a very scalable way. So we're not, I mean, there's still huge work to be done. I will just really quickly make my sort of soapbox semantics comment, which is I get really frustrated with the term access to justice. I really think it's a broader issue. I think it's an access to legal services issue. And every time someone says access to justice, I think of like the banner waver, right? Like the guy who's like, justice! And it's a much bigger problem. And there's a whole issue with legal services that, you know, we can talk about, but I think just even expanding the notion of how we think about this is helpful. That's my quick 2 cents.
I'm serious though, we'd all love to participate, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Over here, we're like, I think we're 1 minute over, so super quick here and then there.
I'll try to be quick. Hi, I'm Carl Florida with Thomson Reuters. I think I know most of you on the panel. Thank you guys for doing this terrific panel. Excited by some of the comments you all made about the consumer experience, client experience. I'm responsible for our small law firm-oriented businesses at Thomson Reuters, so something we think about a lot because our customers actually serve consumers and small businesses directly, of course. What do you see happening, and Richard, actually, particularly a question for you, with firms starting to get it in terms of trying to manage what consumers are expecting today after interacting with lots of other services and other categories that are much more modern, for lack of a better word?
What was the question precisely?
Do you see any lawyers in small firms really innovating around the client experience they deliver to consumers?
Here's what I think is going to happen. I think in 2 or 3 years, every small firm will have to have a client portal, for example, because you have a generation of consumers that expect to deal with their lawyers online. Now we have a very small percentage, but we'll see that mainstream. I saw this in other areas. When we started this paralegal thing, lawyers didn't know what a paralegal was, and it took us like 3 or 5 years to mainstream the concept. Eventually, they're going to really catch up. I mean, consumers want things fast, quick, cheap, better, and they want to relate to their lawyers online. Now, lawyers think that the client needs to come down to the office and meet me so I can look him in the eye, but the reality is the client just wants to text a lawyer and doesn't want to talk to the lawyer on the phone. So as consumer behavior continues to change, it'll drive change in the law firms, in the solo market. I'm confident of that, actually.
I think adoption, sorry.
So I think in the fullness of time, we're going to see that. I put it at about 3 years, actually, 3 to 5 years.
I think a lot of things are going to be adopted by solos, then small firms, then big firms in that order, because they're the ones that are feeling the pain of pricing pressure the most and the earliest.
Okay, last question.
I think the solution may come from outside of firms entirely. Right now, how do you get promoted in a law firm? Well, it's not because you're a great manager of people, but you wind up managing people. What we see in the UK, and whether it's Riverview or there are actually many great, or Slater and Gordon for that matter, these are businesses run as businesses that provide legal services through lawyers, the way a hospital would provide legal services through doctors, but potentially have professional managers. I know there's a lot of focus on lawyers and law firms, and I know you have to, but I think that may not be the answer.
All right, and our last question over here.
Thank you. I'm Ryan Hollander. I'm a law student here. This question is for Abe and Sheri. You both have businesses, well, in both document customization and general payments exchange. There are a multitude of different types of users, each with very distinct needs. I'm curious if you could talk about how you identify the target user, especially early on for your product, and how you really immersed yourself in what their needs were.
Okay, so I'll start. So I started for the first year. I used to be a VP at Symantec in high tech. So for the first year, I talked to parents, moms and dads, step-parents, children, parents who paid, parents who didn't pay, parents who received, parents who didn't receive. I try to find every reason not to do this, because super crazy to give up a corporate job to go do a startup. But it was the consistent pain points and listening for not what is the solution, but what were they feeling and how can you take a process and standardize it in some general way and then address those pain points and then do it uniquely for each different type of person. That's what we did.
So we try to focus on a really specific type of user. Freelancers, especially creative freelancers, they're relatively high frequency use case, so they don't use it once and then you don't see them again for 5 years. It's a big and growing group of people, and their mindset is very much, they're kind of chameleon. They think about things like a consumer, but also like a business. So they want to look professional, they want to get paid, and a lot of times they've had the experience before. Someone asked this earlier. They've had the experience, so it's a very tangible pain point, even if it's not immediate, right? So they may not be having it now and be looking for resolution. They may have had it a month ago, and then when so that makes it a lot easier when you focus and put parameters around who you're targeting and who you're talking to, then you can really talk to a specific person, so.
Thank you.
So I think most of us will be hanging out for the rest of the day. If there's a question that you had that you didn't get a chance to, also please give feedback to the Codex folks. And then otherwise, can you guys give a hand to this fantastic panel?